Thank you, Diana. Everybody hears me, everybody sees my screen. If anybody doesn't, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, we
All
can
right,
see you.
okay, good. Today we're talking about UI automation, and our illustrious hosts for you today are myself. I'm with Anika Systems, which is a government contractor, and I'm the Director of Intelligent Automation. We have Pradeep Shukla, who's with Peraton, and he's a chief technologist. Rashmi Pareek with Victoria's Secret. She's a senior RPA developer, and Devi, who's with qBotica, who is also a commercial and a federal contractor. She is with automation and specialized AI. And then, of course, our illustrious host, Diana Gray, who has her hands in just pretty much about everything. Today's agenda, and I'm going to point some things out to you that we probably will not get to because this is a lot of information to get to in 1 hour. We'll try, but we may not get to it all because UI automation we can spend days or hours and days on UI automation. So we're going to give you a pretty brief introduction to UI automation, what it is, web automation, how to use the recording tool. We may not get to that. And I will tell you, it's a nifty gadget, but for some developers, we don't use it. We find more flexibility in doing it ourselves. So some developers use it, some don't, but we'll try and get to that in this. Selectors in Studio, we'll definitely get to data scraping and screen scraping. I'll give you a quick story about screen scraping. Daniel Dinas, the founder of UiPath, and a group of his friends holed up in an apartment in Romania Daniel used to work for Microsoft, and Microsoft gifted him with a platform they didn't want to use anymore, and that platform eventually became UiPath. And the first breakthrough they had in the development of UiPath was screen scraping, and that's where UiPath launched, was from an apartment in Romania when they discovered the ability to do screen scraping. I will tell you that, and I speak for myself as a developer, and I've been doing this 10 years, I don't do a lot of screen scraping. With the incorporation of computer vision and some of the other newer tools and AI tools that we have now, I haven't found much of a need for screen scraping. Data scraping, yes, that's where we're going to extract some structured data from websites and UIs. And this is where we may not get to today, is this introduction to Excel automation and data tables and data manipulation. That's a whole different area that is quite involved as well. I know Debbie's going to give us a demo a little bit later. She may involve some of this in that demo, but we may not have a chance to delve really deeply into Excel automation and data tables and data manipulation. And it's my understanding that as we progress further in this program, we'll touch on this again. So you won't be missing anything since this is high level, but we can get really into the weeds on both UI automation in Excel and data tables. Launch browser, attach browser, we'll cover that as well. And then this is where Debbie's going to kick in and show us her magnificent demo. I'm going to touch on a couple of UI automation key elements, activities. These are the parts of UiPath that you'll see that perform the actions within the UI. So let's talk about two different UIs. So you have the UI, the user interface, then we have the graphic user interface. So the UI is the elements and the fields. The graphic user interface is going to be the pretty pictures and the backgrounds and the colors and things like that. So those are two different things. So what we're focusing on here is interacting with the UI, which is going to be those fields and those elements that the bot's going to use to either populate data or click on and locate stuff that it needs. Targeting methods. We're going to talk about that. Pradeep's going to talk to us about targeting methods and how we can identify and show the bot what it needs to do on those elements in the UI, whether it's an application UI or a web-based UI. Properties, properties are how the activities know how to behave. I/O methods, I/O meaning in, out. That means we can type information into a UI or an application or a web page, and we can extract data and fields and text from that in, out. The recorder, I kind of touched on really quick. extraction wizards. This is how we extract data from a UI. And I'll give you an example. If you think about eBay, if we look at eBay or Amazon, it's just a field of different pictures with descriptions. We click on the links, it pulls up more information. Well, that's actually a data table. It's just rendered a little bit differently in the UI. So we can extract a lot of information from eBay and Amazon just by identifying to the robot or the bot or the automation bot, whatever you want to call it, how to extract that data. We can get underlying URLs. We can get deeper into that data as far as maybe who's offering that product, what the price is, and things like that. So those are the extraction wizards. I don't think we're going to get an object repository a lot today. I left that off. As a matter of fact, it's kind of like we're kind of doing high level object repository. It's a little bit more in depth, and it might be a little bit confusing at this level. So I left that out of our presentation today. Containers, that just simply tells us, are we using Chrome? Are we using Edge? Are we using Firefox with our automation? It's telling the automation what extension to use, how to communicate with what web driver we're using. And then synchronization. We'll talk about synchronization in this session as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Rashmi so she can talk to you about activities, properties, and other parts of this. Rashmi?
Thanks, Chris, for this opportunity, and good afternoon, everyone. So today we'll talk about the input methods. And input method basically refers to the techniques that we use for the automation to interact with the UI elements. Okay, these methods define how basically we simulate the clicks, like by clicking, typing, or selecting to the screen. The choice of inputs may impact with the speed, reliability, compatibility, and the automation, but primarily the input methods. So we use basically 4 input methods: hardware events, simulate, send Windows message, and Chromium API. So let's learn about all these 4 events like in depth about that. So what hardware events basically do, it simulates the real keyboard and the mouse action by generating the low-level events directly to the hardware level. So the key features basically for this one is it's mimic the physical actions, making it highly reliable for the application that requires direct input. It works well with the application that does not respond to the default simulate or send Windows messages methods and can interact virtually with any applications. It do have some limitations that basically requires target application to always be on the foreground, and so that it does means that if any application which is in background, it will not work. So, and the another limitations, I would say, it's basically the slower than the simulate and the send Windows messages method. So this is about the hardware event, and now talk about the send Windows messages. Send Windows messages basically send the keyboard mouse message directly to the target applications where Windows using the Windows API. The key features, I would say, it works in background, similar to the simulate key, but I would say it's a bit of the slower than the simulate method, and it may not work with some of the modern UI frameworks as well. And to talk about the simulate type click, simulate actions basically by sending the direct instruction to the application's UI framework by passing to the bypassing the operating system. So the key feature, I would say, it's the fastest than the default method, works very well in the background, but the only thing you guys need to make sure that it should be reliable to the applications, because as a limitation, I would say it may not work with all the application, specifically the older and the legacy one. But if your application do support the simulate case, I think this is one of the best input method which one can use for this one. And the fourth one, we can talk about the Chromium API, which is the modern browser automation. The Chromium API is used to basically to automate the web browsers like Chrome, Edge, and any other base, the Chromium engine, like any browser use that. In my knowledge, I think it's Chrome and Edge, but any other browser do use that, we can use this method. And it basically directly integrates, API integrates with the browser. So this method leverage the dev tools, protocols, and interact with the web elements as well. Key features, if I talk about, it's very faster, more reliable, and the traditional UI automation method, specifically for the browser. And the limitation, if I talk about, it's not kind of a limitation, but in order to use this one, you should have the browser extension or to configure the enable the API access in order to, works well with the browsers. And limitation, if I already talked about, Chrome and Edge are the one, or any other Chromium, in order to, if you are using the Firefox or any other different, the browser to automate, you may use the other, the input elements which we talk about, but this Chromium might not work over there. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. So for the output methods, if I talk about, let's understand what output method is. So basically it refers to the techniques that we use to extract or retrieve the data from the application to use the interface during the automation. So these methods like bot to capture the text, UI attributes, or the visuals data for processing. So we do have like 3 methods: full text, OCR, and the native. So let's understand what these methods are. So full text will extract the text from the applications or the UI element that basically underlying the properties without relying on how text is displayed on the screen. So the key feature, I would say, it's fast, it's reliable, it retrieves the hidden or the off-screen text data. It extracts the text, even the UI element is not visible, giving us the 100% accuracy for that one. And just a little bit use case, like the system logs, tables, or the hidden app elements, like we can use this methods. And the only limitation is what I would say is like it does not prevents the formatting of the text. If some text is in a bold format or a font size or something, it will just give you the plain text, but not gonna give you the preserved format of that. So the second thing we can talk about the native. So what native does is like it extracts the text by directly accessing the application's graphical interface. So the key feature is it's slower but more accurate than certain UI elements. It can retrieve the text from more than non-standard UI framework. The use case also, if we can think about and talk about it, extract the legacy and the custom build applications. If we have any legacy application or any custom build applications, we can use this one. And the scenarios interacting with non-standard UI elements, this is the best you can select for the output one. Limitation, I would say it's reliable on selectors. It requires reliable selectors. So like very specific selector, and may not consistently work with across all the applications. So you have to see like which one you have to use for what. So the third one, if I can talk about, is OCR. The full form is, we know, optical character recognition. As the name, we can see anything related to the image or the pixel on the screen. We can go with the OCR thing. Key features, it extract the data from the images, from scanned documents, or the inaccessible UI element. It supports multiple OCR engines, Google, Tesseract, Microsoft OCRs, and even work with non-standard text or something. Anything in the form of image or something, it will work. So use cases also, if I talk about, if you have like scanned documents or the PDF, this is the one of the best or the first solution that you can look for. Or if you're working for the Citrix or the VDI, you will use the the computer vision that basically works with the OCR technology only. It will capture the screen and with the image, and then it try to elements, identify the elements. The only limitation for this one to not to use directly, because it's slower than the any other method, and accuracy may depends on the image quality. So it depends. If your image quality is good, it may extract, but sometimes if image quality goes drop, it might not able to extract the same data. So yeah. Thank you. For the UI synchronization in the UiPath, basically, I would say refers to the activities and the technologies that ensure the automation process with the elements available by performing the actions. This will help us to check whether the the application has been loaded or not, or dynamic loading, or the responsiveness, or all kind of issues. So there are many other activities as well, but the highly built, I'll talk about the check app state, and the verify execution, and the pick branch and all. So check app state, what this activity basically used to determine the specific UI element is available or not on the screen. So it's allow us to define the different action to be taken, whether the element is found or not. So I would say it is basically now the combination of 3 activities, which is element exist, on element appear, and the element vanish activity. So the second one, I talk about the verify execution. So what verify execution is, it's not it's a property. It's not a standalone activity or something, but rather than, I would say, it's a feature that integrates specifically to the modern design experience activity. So it is used to confirm the action to perform to the UI element was successfully executed or not. A property available for the click, type into, or the hover activities. So the third one and the last one is like pick and branch. The pick and the pick branch activities in the UiPath are part of the workflows control activity, design and handle for the multiple potential triggers or the action in a single workflow. So they are particularly useful when you execute the different set of actions based on the event occurs first. So the pick activity is a container activity that is workflow automation that allows a monitor for multiple input source simultaneously and execute the appropriate branch of the activities based on the first available input. And pick branch activity, if I talk about high level, this main component of the pick branch activity, which respect specifically branch or the path of the activities, it basically has like two actions, trigger and the action part. So thank you.
And now we're going to go to Pradeep to start with are you going to touch on the web recorder today, Pradeep, or do you want me to go forward one?
Let's talk briefly about it.
Okay. All yours.
All right. Thank you, Chris and Rashmi for this the session up till this point. And let me take over from here, and we'll talk about a few key elements in the UI automation itself. So as Chris talked about before, like app recorder or web recorder, this particular tool has, I completely agree that it has a love-hate relationship with various developers. Some developers really love to use it. Some developers completely ignore it and they go start building out natively. Having said that, I would emphasize one particular benefit of using it. Primarily when you're starting out as a new developer and you don't have enough experience, you're just building out your first few automations. At that stage, App Recorder is actually helpful because you're still learning out. It helps you with a very simple recording feature where you can perform simple steps. So let's say very simple example, right? You want to search for a particular item, or you're looking for a new wall charger. I was actually searching for a new wall charger a few days back on Amazon. So you can go log into the website and you just search your uh, keyword. You can enter a wall charger, 64-watt wall charger or 40-watt wall charger for to charge 4 devices, right? Something like that. And while you're recording this, and you just go by your search operation, right? You go through each of the steps, enter keystrokes, go through a few search results that you have got, pick one of these, open it, look at properties while the recorder is recording everything behind the scene. And when you are satisfied, you stop that recording. What it does, it actually generates a skeleton of the steps that you have performed. The beauty is it's all done behind the scene, and it's not interrupting any of the tasks or any of the operations that you're performing on the browser itself. So it's completely non-invasive for that matter. When you go look inside the skeleton code that's generated, you'll see a lot of repetitive objects or repetitive steps, and that is where some experienced developers don't like it because it actually makes it uh, too busy, right? You have a lot of if you click here and there, which essentially you didn't mean to, but you still did it in any ways, that just clutters the whole workflow. um, you can go clean it up, build it from scratch. But when you're starting out, it's really helpful to see what you're performing, the steps you're performing on screen, how that gets converted into a code. So I think that's the experience, or that's the view you get right away, rather than starting from scratch altogether. So I think that's the stage where you would use it most. Essentially, as you learn more, as you get more hands on with the tool itself, You may choose to completely drop it, or you may use it partially depending on the use case. So it's pretty nifty tool. It has grown a lot. It has improved a lot. It's in earlier versions there used to be memory issues with this, but now it's pretty swift and faster. So I like it depending on the use case. Sometimes you can choose to use it. Some of the options you see on the screen, this is just a standard view of a recorder when we start it. It actually provides you some options where you can provide input methods. Some of the input methods Rashmi just talked earlier. So you can choose what kind of input you want to use it. You also have an option for object repository, which is a little bit advanced concept for this session, because it gives you a tree-like structure for all the objects, all the containers, all the layers that you can look, and you can play around with it if you have some more experience with it. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about targets and anchors. So whenever in UI automation, right, it's always a question how a computer knows where a particular element is on the screen. Okay, so there's no magic. If you have done any kind of programming, if you remember in I would say if you even if you're high level programming or if you use C, C++, you would see that you have to provide coordinates. So that's where it all starts, that how to find a position of a particular element on a web page or a standard Windows application, right? You need to know what are the X and Y coordinates. With modern tools, with UiPath, what we have, we really, and because we don't really need to know those coordinates, because first of all, that coordinate position is not a static position across different, even different monitors. Sometimes if you have a much larger monitor with a higher resolution, it might be completely different. So it's not something that's scalable solution, right? You always have to go fix it and work through that. So modern UI runs around two primary concepts, uh, an anchor and a target. And these two actually, essentially inside of it, there are multiple other parameters that get captured. When you do look at the sample code, when you run through it, you will find other elements here, but primarily these two, as a user's point of view, as a developer's point of view, these two provide you precise information up to the mark. There may be few areas which we'll talk about in the next slide, how selectors come into picture to make it more accurate. But primarily, if you're trying to find out a text box, right, where your automation needs to enter, let's say it's an employee directory, you want to enter first name, last name, that kind of information. So you have an anchor. Anchor provides you a base. So like in this example, right? So the name label is the anchor here, and target, where I'm going to actually enter the values, is the text box that is next to it, adjacent to it, however you want to refer to it. So those two in combination helps you identify which element you want to target and you want to perform operation on it, whether it's a data entry, whether it's even for data extraction, or if they are some other controls other than text box, whether it's a checkbox, drop down, whatever it may be. Since we are going through UI automation, those are the two primarily uh, two primary ways or two primary properties of a UI element to find it uniquely and then be able to interact with it. Next slide, please. All right, so that's the most interesting part. So any time when I'm working through new developers who are onboarding on UiPath platform, even if they have a background in programming, selectors is the most I would say is the most interesting area where we have to really put uh, focus on it to grab the concept of what selectors can do and how they are defined in it. So primarily selector concept is XML fragment. So essentially on a screen, besides what we talked about anchors and targets, there are other elements too that gets captured behind the scene to uniquely identify. And those are all created as an XML DOM object, which is called selectors behind the scene. So you will capture like the title of the page where you are. You would capture different containers that you have within that page. So all that becomes part of your selector itself. So it talks about nodes, tags, attributes. These are all different elements of an object on the screen. And from a user's point of view, the the beauty is the user doesn't have to provide. User just have to click on that particular UI element. The the UI automation behind the scene captures all this information, and it becomes part of that selection criteria itself. We do have options to go back and edit those selectors and make adjustments to it depending on if the selector and how we want to use that selector. So we'll talk about that. There are different type of selectors that can be built and be used. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so we talk about selectors here. So primarily, at a broad level, there are two type of selectors: a full selector and a partial selector. So let's try to understand that. Full selector is where we have tracking of a particular element from the top node of the UI itself. So what is the top node of a UI? You would say it's like a title of your browser itself. So if you open Amazon.com or eBay.com, that will become your title. So that's kind of a reference point. It starts from there and it goes all the way down to the individual element itself. Full selectors have all that information. As the name suggests, it's pretty much fixed. So if you really want to find an element that is at a fixed location every time, and you do not anticipate any changes, or you don't want to have any dynamism into it, full selectors are the best way to go. Usually you would have that option available to you. Whereas partial selectors, you have as the name suggests, right? Partial doesn't mean that it only can find partial information. Partial primarily means that it has some additional features available to it to be able to find information, even if in a new screen or when you're running through a different iteration of it, even if something is missing, it can still able to find it. So uh, in terms of building partial selectors, you would not be looking at like, okay, what's the top node is, what's the next node is, but primarily the UI element or the text box or the other interactive objects that you want to use it. There are different options within these selectors. We have like a window selector, which is a full selector in a way. A strict selector is also another full selector, comes under full selector category, where you have it's strictly specific to that particular UI element itself. And then you have another concept as a fuzzy selector. I like that concept because it's one of the partial selector options, because it actually uses a fuzzy logic algorithm behind the scene uh, to identify objects. So even if you don't, and you have, so you can use that to be able to dynamically identify objects. There are a few other options within we are not talking about dynamic selectors here. So mostly it's static selectors, but I'll talk about briefly and then I'll hand over to Devi because she has a working demo for us to go through in more details. So dynamic selectors actually where we have option to provide variables, or we have options to ways to use wildcard in terms of be able to identify the object. We don't want to restrict it, right? So these can be either they can be using a fuzzy logic or fuzzy search logic. It can be using a regex based search model that can help you, or there are other case sensitive non-greedy search add-ons on top of it to make it more dynamic, more programmatically accessible selectors in a simple way. So I hope that gives you a good idea of what selectors are. This is a very important topic on UI automation side of it. If you really want to be comfortable definitely focus on it, because it may take a couple of iterations to get hold of the concept, how it is being used. But once you have mastered it, your life will be really easy in terms of when you're doing UI automation. So that being said, I'll hand it over to Debbie for the demo.
All right, Debbie, I'm going to stop sharing and let you take over.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks Pradeep, Chris, and Rashmi for providing more insights on UI automation. Let me know if you can see my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
It's Devi.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so for any web-based automation, before starting about the working part, we should decide on the browser type. So this browser type is decided based on the compatibility of the application. So you can choose based on that whether to use Chrome, Firefox, or Edge browser. So once the browser is chosen, you need to make sure that whether you have installed extension which helps UiPath to interact with the UI elements and trigger events by talking to the application. So we have extensions for Chrome, Edge, and Firefox here in the tools page, and you can install it for your corresponding browser type. So once it is installed, you need to make sure whether it's enabled or not. So you can do so by going to the browser and then what's this? So you can go to the browser and check for the manage extensions. And here you can see whether UiPath extension is enabled or not. So this needs to be enabled to identify the elements in the browser. And for the demo purpose, we are going to work with a website called AMER. So this is a test website. You can also register to this website and work for your testing or development purpose. For this demo, we are going to log into this website, extract some work items, and save it to an Excel workbook. So to start with, I have created a blank project which has the main sequence. We can add UI activities by clicking on this plus icon. There is a container for any UI-based automation, which we call as use application or browser activity. On selecting this, it will add the activity to the main sequence. You need to indicate the target application. So if you click on this indicate application, it will allow you to choose the application you want to automate. So as I have this browser open and I want to automate this, I'm selecting this page. You see that it automatically detects the URL of the page, and in the target, we could see the selector having an HTML tag with the app name as Chrome and also the title of the page. So by this selector, UiPath identifies which browser to use and also which page to be used. So now we have invoked the browser. Now we are going to perform UI activities like typing into the email text box and type into the password text box, and then we are going to click on login. So to enter value to the email text box, we can use either type into or set text. With type into, it will mimic the process just like human typing in the keyboard. So I'm trying to use type into activity here. I'm clicking on indicate. So I'm going to choose this email text box. you see that it's searching for the target selectors. And once the selectors are identified, it will list it here. So we have strict selector, which has a web control tag and an ID email, and it has a tag type as input. We also have a fuzzy selector, which uses a fuzzy algorithm to identify the element in the UI. And we can also enable computer vision if none of these methods work. So for our purpose, we can stick to the strict selector as it uniquely identifies the element. If the automation is not able to identify the element from strict selector, we can go for fuzzy selector, or we can also use anchor tag so that it will identify the element which is close to the target element, and which would help it to predict the target element. Now I'm going to enter the text which we need to enter in the email text box. Next step, we have to enter into password box. So in the same way, I'm going to choose the password text box. So once we click on the text box, UiPath automatically identifies the element and bring the selectors. I'm confirming this one. And while working with password, you can use a standard one or a secure string. But using secure string will make sure that the password value that you enter here will not be saved as a plain text in the operating system. So it's good to use the secure string so that your password would be more secure. But for the demo purpose, I'm not going to use that. And we also have the toggle password mode here so that the value you enter here will not be visible to anyone. Now the next step is we have to click on the login button. So to do so, we have an activity called click. And I'm going to add that here. And we are going to select that login button here. So now we have completed a sequence where we interact with the browser, and then we type into the email text box, we type into the password, and we click on the login button. So I'm going to run this automation. So for usually main will be the entry point of an automation. So if you click on run, it will start from the main workflow. If you click on run file, it will run from the file which is in the panel activated one. Now we see the project is compiling. So the green arrow at the bottom of the taskbar shows that the bot is running. It has typed into the email, password, and it clicked on the login, and it brought the dashboard button. So dashboard page. So from here, we are going to navigate to the work items page. And in the work items page, we have a list of work IDs and the corresponding status in the form of a structured table. and it spans across multiple pages. We see there are 10 pages and each page having at most 10 rows. So let's see how do we extract this detail. So first from dashboard, we have to navigate to the work item page. So I'm going to create a new sequence workflow. And we are going to use application browser activity. And from here, we are selecting this page. Now we have this page and we are going to add a click activity. To click on the work item menu. To confirm the selector. And once it is clicked, we have to extract this structure table. So to extract this table, we have this table extraction. So once we click on table extraction, it will allow you to select the data to be extracted from the screen. So we should select the first row, any value in the first row, so that the complete table will be identified and extracted. So I'm going to select this one. So it is showing us a pop-up whether would you like to extract all the columns from the table. So I'm clicking yes. And you see here, it has extracted 7 columns and 10 rows. So the first column is actions, and the next one is the action URL, and then it has the list of WIDs and then description, type, status, as well as date. Now we have only 10 rows here, but we want to extract data from all other pages as well. So to do that, we have to enable extract data from multiple pages by toggling this button. And then we have to select the next button. So the next button will be like an arrow symbol here. And I'm choosing that. So once that is done, we can save and close this. So you will see the activity added here, which is extract table data. And it also has an output data table assigned, which is extract data table. So we can see the type of the variable here in the variable pane. And post extraction, I'm going to do some data table activities. Like we see there are different types of WI here. So we have WI1, WI2, 4. We have multiple WIDs here. So I'm going to extract only the type WI5 from here and then save it to an Excel by sorting it by the WID. So we can do that by adding a filter table activity. So with filter data table, we can filter the input table by providing condition to keep or remove any matching rows, or by keep or removing the column selections. So for our demo purpose, I'm first giving the input table here, extract data table. And if you know the column name, you can mention the column name here. If you're not sure of the column name, it will start with the index of 0. So all rows and columns of data table starts with the index 0. So while extraction of table, we saw that first 2 columns where first column was blank and the second one was having URL. So I don't want to have those columns in my output. So I'm removing those columns. So I'm removing first 2 columns here. So which is 0 and 1. And for the rows, I'm going to filter it by the condition type. So I want to have the rows only that matches this condition with type is equal to WI5. And clicking on OK. And we have to assign an output table here. So I'm going to create it from here. So I'm clicking on Control K. I'm giving a name to the variable. And then enter. So we see that a new variable DT filter table got created in the variable pane. Now we have filtered the table. Now if we want to sort the table by any column, we can do so by using sort data table activity. And to this, we have to provide the input table where we have the rows to be sorted. So I'm providing DT filter table as the input. And in the output, I'm giving DT sorted table as a new variable. And to define by what columns, we can either use the column data type, or we can give the index of the column, or we can go by the name of the column. So I'm going by the name of the column, as we know, by its WIID, and we are going to sort it by the ascending order. So till now, we are navigating to the work items page. We are extracting a structured table and saving it as a data table in the extract data table. And we are filtering the data table by keeping only the rows that matches the condition type is equal to WI5. And we are removing first two columns as we don't want that in the output file. And we also sorted the table by the WID column so that the output is sorted. And finally, we are going to write that to one workbook. So to write to an Excel workbook, we have write range workbook activity. To this, we need to provide the input path. So if we provide only the file name, workbook will be created in the path where the project is running. And I'm giving the sheet name. And I'm providing the data table that needs to be written in the workbook. So if you want to write the file in a different path, you can do so by providing the complete path here in this text box. And if the workbook already exists in the path, the data table will get overwritten in the existing file. So if you want to add more data to an existing workbook, then we have to use append range workbook. Now to add headers to the first row of the Excel so that the data table could have the column names, we have to enable this by toggling this checkbox. So now we see here, we have navigated to the work items page. We are extracting table, we are filtering the data table, we have sorted it out, and we are writing it to an Excel workbook. Now I'm going to run this in a debug mode to show how the values are getting assigned. So to run the file in a debug mode, we had to set a breakpoint at any activity that you want to validate the output. And we can run it using debug file button here. I'm navigating this page to the dashboard so that it will start from where it left off. So now the project is compiling. Now we see here, we see the page numbers that is selected getting changed. We see 1, 2, 3. Now we are in 4th page. We are in 5th page. So the bot is automatically navigating to the next page and extracting the data and appending those data to a single data table. Now, once this table data were extracted, it will do the filtering part. So we have it now here. Okay, so now we see the values are populated in the extract data table. Now I'm going to click on step into so that this activity gets executed and it will stop on the next activity. We see now the DT filter data table was populated by removing the first 2 columns. And it also contains only the rows that matches with the type WI5. But it's not yet sorted out. We are going to execute the sort table activity now. So I'm clicking on step into so that that activity get executed. Okay, so now we have records in the DT sorted table. So we see that the records are sorted by the WID, and it has only the records that is matching with the type WI5. And we are going to write this to an Excel. That's the final step. So I'm going to navigate to this folder. So I'm clicking on File Explorer. And we see the work items Excel here. So we have the records with the table column names and which is filtered record and also sorted by the WID. So by this, we are coming to the end of demo.
Thank you for that, Devi. I appreciate that. Thank you from Pradeep and Rashmi as well. Are there any questions that we can answer that are not in the chat, or are there any questions in the chat that we need to still answer, Diana?
I think everything is answered at this point. If anybody wants to take themselves off mute and just ask out loud, you're welcome to ask any other questions you have too. Yeah, great job, everybody, with the session today. I appreciate everybody coming. All the speakers, amazing job. And thank you also for answering all the questions in chat. And again, you can open your mics if you have any questions. We have our last session for this series tomorrow, but we'll be doing additional series. So just if you have any thoughts or anything, we'll give you another few minutes to just say anything you want. Remember that I put where to register for the session tomorrow. And then I also put information on the forum. So I just recommend anybody as part of this program in general to sign up for the forum, to be part of the Veterans Day series page, the chapter, because anytime you need help, you can just reach out on the UiPath community forum and people will be there to help you with any type of automation you have to do. So just make sure you take advantage of that as well. And I'm still not seeing any questions, so I think that's it, Chris.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thanks
Hey,
for all the help,
Diana.
guys.
Thank you.
I think Richard was going to ask a question, Diana.
Okay.
I did. It's not specific to this, but I know we've had a lot of MVPs that have shown up. What does it take to become an MVP? That was a question I was thinking from Monday, and then I had a second question after that. Chris, you said something about Anika has a innovation hub. How would
Right.
a company go about setting up that innovation hub? So those are really my two questions.
So who would like
I'll
to
let you do.
answer the question about the MVP? I'll
Sure.
put the link to where you can find more information, but if somebody wants to answer that.
MVP, and I will tell you, Richard, being an MVP can be kind of demanding, but you have to have a mission for other people. You have to have a mission for UiPath. You have to have a passion for sharing what UiPath does for people. I mean, developing automations, you see the impact it has on people and on their job and their job satisfaction, and you take that and you expand that out. So for myself, I particularly, as Diana knows, I do more teaching than I do other MVP roles. But there are MVP roles that work in answering questions in the forum, doing speaking engagements and things like that. So use the link that Diana gave you and kind of flesh it out. It's a very dynamic program, but it is very involved. I think that's fair to say, right, Diana?
Yeah, it is. And the other thing is, we nominate people for MVPs once a year, and typically we like them to have at least 2 years of exposure to UiPath products and working with them. But you can find all the information there. The criteria and the nomination process closes on November 24th, which is really soon. And the other thing is, if you're interested in being a MVP, you can always reach out to me, and what I'll do is schedule some time with you. And then I will tell you how to start getting involved in the community so that next year when that application time rolls around, you're set. You pretty much know what an MVP is, then you've helped in the community already, because you don't have to wait to be an MVP to help in the community. If you're interested in this, and then you can see if you like it or not. So that's another thing you can do if you haven't been, participating in the community. But also this veterans community is a new community. And so if anybody's interested in participating in this, especially if you're a veteran, I'd love it. It would be super cool. Yeah.
And I think your second question was about how we set up a lab. Is that correct? Or some sort of hub? Is that
Yes,
what you're
yeah,
asking?
the innovation hub. I think you mentioned it.
Right, I did. And where I work, at least, the Innovation Hub is a part of our Center of Excellence. It's an arm of the Center of Excellence. And we assign intern developers or junior developers or even some senior developers, some SME, we call them SME developers. And we have them go through and work with things like WebDriver headless, or work with things like picture-in-picture, and build business cases around those, build demos around those, and build training manuals around those. And then we take that information when we have a client agency in the federal sector that wants to know about those things, then we have them teach those and present those. Our biggest one recently, just so you know, very large federal agency, tens of billions of dollars involved in this agency, wanted to learn Test Suite. So we kind of redirected our people that were in this innovation hub to really focus on Test Suite and what it involved, and business cases around Test Suite and demos around Test Suite. And then we ended up teaching 450 people in this very large agency how Test Suite works, and so that they can adopt Test Suite. So we set it up through our COE. Setting it up individually, it can be quite expensive, so you need the support of course, your executive team or whatever agency you're with, and then the support of your COE, Center of Excellence. And I hope
Okay.
that helps answer your question.
So it's not something that's set up through partnership. It's something that Anika did theirself to basically provide those skills,
Right.
right? So
In my
okay,
instance, it's not through a partnership. However, there are some times where we will do some proof of concepts for some of our client agencies, and we can give them access into our sandboxes through Azure and through Orchestrator to come in and test those POCs. So we do have the flexibility in our innovation hub for a client agency to have limited access, because you can control that through Azure or Orchestrator, what they can see just by adding a new tenant. You know what I mean? So we do have the clients sometimes have access to that. I hope that helps expand upon that.
It does. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I just want to say, I know everybody's been saying thank you for your service, and I express it as well. I will say to all of our guests that my grandfather died, excuse me, on the USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor. I never met him, but my uncle, Mick, died in Vietnam in 1970. I was 5. I met him. So I not only thank you for your service, I thank you for your sacrifice. I know there is quite a bit of sacrifice involved in that. Excuse my emotion, I apologize.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris.
No reason to apologize. Thanks for sharing, Chris.
I appreciate that, Jeremy.
Part of the reason why I think I joined, right, as a young teenager, seeing my grandfather's picture of him in his Navy uniform, just kind of really, I wanted a picture like that. So I definitely understand and can relate to that sentiment, and seeing, family members represent, the service. So I thank you for sharing your story, and I appreciate, not just what your family's done, but the legacy that lives on, obviously, through, what your thoughts are. So thank you for sharing, Chris.
Yeah. And I think that's why we're doing this program too, is we do care, that
Absolutely.
we train you on new skills, anything we can do to help out. So, we appreciate you guys being here and continuing with the service, and we'll provide additional content, throughout the year. So, great. With that, I think, I'm gonna end the recording.